What we're looking at here is an audacious Ukrainian drone attack on Russian air bases that destroyed or damaged a score of its long-range bombers. Dubbed Operation Spider's Web, Ukraine's security service struck 4 Russian airfields separated by 2,500 miles near simultaneously. Dozens of FPV drones were smuggled to the airstrips inside wooden cabins, emerged completely by surprise, then crashed into Putin's precious aircraft and blew them to bits. The one-of-a-kind mission raises a lot of questions. How did Ukraine pull it off? How did the technology behind it work? What sort of weapons were used? And perhaps most importantly, how will all of that change the way wars are fought in the future? Let's find out. First, the weapons. This is the drone Ukraine used for this attack, an FPV or first-person view drone called OSA, which means wasp in English. Compared to typical Ukrainian FPVs, which you can learn more about here, OSA have several unique features which specialize them for this mission. Just like a typical FPV, they are quadcopters, so have 4 arms and 4 propellers with a battery, signal receiver, and a camera at the center. In most FPVs, these components are exposed, but OSA has a metal case which protects them. This makes them harder to damage, which we'll come back to in a moment. Most FPVs also have a basic explosive, like a PG-7 anti-tank rocket, strapped underneath, which explodes when it's flown face first into a target, destroying whatever is in front of it at the time, like a Russian tank. But OSA are more sophisticated. The explosives are contained within 2 bars that connect the front and rear propellers. This makes the drone more compact, another key feature we'll return to in just a moment. These bars have a core made of copper, which is molded into a distinct U shape and then enclosed in explosives. When the explosives detonate, this shape creates a jet of molten metal that shoots directly downwards, destroying whatever is beneath the drone. This is because the targets of these drones weren't tanks, but grounded aircraft. Aircraft present relatively thin targets from the side, making them difficult for drones to strike head-on. But from the top, they're much larger and easier to hit, while their weak points are also more exposed from above. But the drones were only one part of the weapon. The other part was the launch system. For this, Ukraine used prefabricated wooden cabins that can be loaded onto the back of a truck 2 at a time, like a trailer. These are designed to look innocent, but hide a lethal secret. Every cabin has a removable roof which slides or blows off when a signal is sent to a receiver hidden somewhere within the frame. Underneath the roof is a narrow compartment that is split into 9 sections, and inside these sections are the drones. This is why they need to be compact and hard to damage, because they need to fit inside the compartment and survive a long journey on the back of a truck to reach their target. Once the truck reaches the target, the roof is removed and the drones are free to take off and hunt down the bombers. If we go back to the tapes, we can see all of that in action. Here's a video taken at the site of one of the attacks. You can see 2 of the wooden cabins attached to the back of a truck here. You can see how one of the OSA drones emerges from its hiding place here, and then it flies off towards the airfield where black smoke is already rising. If we take a look at a different video, we can see what that looks like from the drone's point of view. As it takes off from its hiding place, you can see the other compartment on top of the cabin here. The drone then flies to the nearby airfield where it selects an aircraft to attack, in this case a Tupolev Tu-22 bomber. But instead of flying into it head-on, it attacks from the top down with its downward-facing explosives. Aiming for weak spots on the bomber's wings, you can see how much damage those explosives cause. These still images give us an even better look. Here's the wooden cabins, 8 of them in total. And here's a stack of disassembled OSA drones. The drone bodies are over here, and the propellers are over here. Here's the complete drones loaded into the top of the cabins with the roof rolled back. And this image gives us the clearest look we have of the explosives. You can see the exposed copper bars here and that distinctive U-shape. And here's the protective frame which contains all of the delicate electrical components. Next, let's take a look at the technology involved. Usually, FPVs rely on a connection between the drone and the pilot to function because the pilot needs a live video feed to steer, so they need to be close to one another. But Spider's Web involved attacks thousands of miles from Ukraine, and Ukraine says all of its pilots were on its soil at the time. So, how's that possible? Well, we believe the drones were fitted with LTE modems that allowed them to connect to local Russian 4G mobile networks. That basically turned the drone into a webcam transmitting a live video feed over the internet like you would on a Zoom call all the way back to Ukraine. But as we've all experienced on Zoom, the video is often unreliable. The picture breaks up, lags, or freezes. Usually, that's just annoying. But with a drone, losing signal could cause it to drop out of the sky. So Ukraine fitted the drones with a miniature computer, such as a Raspberry Pi, loaded with an open-source program called Audacious. Audacious is an autopilot for drones. It can do many things, but one feature is designed to keep them flying even if the connection to the pilot breaks up. This is known as fail-safe mode, and when active, it will display the word fail-safe across the screen in large red letters. Ukraine also built in one last piece of technology to ensure success: artificial intelligence. Around 18 months before the attack took place, the company which makes OSA, First Contact, said it was experimenting with AI. This was designed to take over from the human pilot in the last mile, flying the drone to a preset location, identifying its own target, and then flying the drone into it. This overcomes Russian jamming, because if the AI is flying, then there's no signal between the drone and the pilot to block. We think the AI used in the airfield attack was trained to recognize Russian bombers using models in Ukrainian museums and old military storage sites. It was drilled to recognize the aircraft and guide the drone to their weak spots, even if the connection to the pilot was lost entirely. Let's go back to the tapes again. This is live footage captured by the Ukrainians during the attack. We know it's live because it appeared online at the same time the attacks were reported, and it was posted by the perpetrators, Ukraine Security Service, or SBU. That means they must have had a connection to the drones during the attack. Here, we can see the large fail-safe message in red letters across the screen, which means the Audacious system is active. It is especially apparent when the video appears to be freezing or glitching, which we can see here and here. And while it's not obvious from the footage alone that AI is in use, if we take a look at this message uploaded by the SBU after the attacks, we can see they reported it themselves. What this bit says is that the drones were piloted using, quote, autonomous artificial intelligence algorithms and manual operator intervention. Last, let's look at how the attack was organized. The Ukrainian agent at the center of the spider's web is believed to be a man called Artem Timofeyev. Ukrainian-born, Artem lived for a time in Kiev, where he ran his own clothing company and was a vocal supporter of the protest that toppled Ukraine's last pro-Russian government. Sometime later, Artem moved to the Russian city of Chelyabinsk, where he started another business, this time in logistics. It was this business, Chelyabinsk's location, and his vocal support of Ukraine that almost certainly brought him to the attention of the SBU. Chelyabinsk is just 80 miles from the borders with Kazakhstan, a neutral country through which many sanctioned goods, including electronics, flow into Russia. We suspect Ukraine used this as cover to get the wooden cabins and drones into Kazakhstan and then across the Russian border. Once inside Russia, they were taken to a warehouse in Chelyabinsk that Artem's business rented, where the drones were assembled and hidden away inside the cabins. Then Artem had the cabins shipped all over Russia, using his logistics business as cover and hiring unsuspecting Russian drivers to do it. The drivers were sent to Olenya in the far north of Russia, Ivanovo and Diaglievo, which are within 100 miles of Moscow, and Belaya, some 2,500 miles away in Siberia. Drivers who were questioned after the attacks said they were told to call Artem when they were nearby, and he then gave them a precise location to stop, within drone range of the air bases. With the trucks in place, Artem must have then tipped off the SBU, who launched their attack. The date was June the 1st, Russia's Military Transportation Aviation Day. The SBU remotely activated the cabins, whose roofs slid back or were blown off, to reveal the drones underneath. Controlled by a mixture of pilots based back in Ukraine and AI, the drones then took off and carried out their attack. President Zelensky said a total of 117 were launched and damaged or destroyed a total of 41 Russian bombers. If true, that would be a third of Russia's total, costing $7 billion, though it no longer manufactures some of them. So strictly speaking, they cannot be replaced at any price. Video of the attack, satellite imagery, and open source researchers suggest the true toll is likely lower than that, somewhere between 10 and 20 bombers, or around 10% of Russia's total. Though that revised total also includes 2 A-50s, spy planes fitted with sophisticated radar, of which Russia only has 8. Whilst all of that was happening, Artem vanished, probably across the Kazakh border. Ukraine said shortly afterwards that none of the perpetrators were still on Russian soil, and Russia has been unable to find him. The fallout from the attack has been significant. First and foremost, it dealt a serious blow to some of Putin's most valuable aircraft without a single Ukrainian loss in return. Moscow has been using these bombers to launch devastating attacks on Ukraine with long-range cruise missiles. The bombers stay far from Ukraine during the attacks, so cannot be hit, while the missiles they fire are also hard to shoot down because Russia floods Ukraine's skies with hundreds of Shahed drones to overwhelm air defenses just as they arrive. Spider's web almost certainly stopped one of these attacks because some of the bombers were loaded with cruise missiles when they were struck, and it will make future strikes harder. Fewer planes means the remaining ones must fly more missions, will break down faster, and there's less places to get spare parts to fix them now. They must also fly further. To protect them from future attacks, Russia has moved them to even more remote air bases. Russia also has to think more carefully about how it defends air bases that were previously thought to be beyond Ukraine's reach. Containers will have to be checked, which takes time and manpower. Air defenses will have to be improved, which means diverting resources from the front, and so on. All of that throws sand in the gears of Russia's war machine, meaning it runs less well than it should and yields poorer results. Perhaps most importantly, from Ukraine's point of view, it was humiliating for Putin. Just a few months ago, Donald Trump sat President Zelensky down in the Oval Office and told him he didn't have the cards to win the war. But it seems Zelensky was holding more cards than Trump gave him credit for. It has been a while since the Ukrainians had something to cheer, and this was an unambiguous win, proving they are still well and truly in this fight. For the rest of the world, it shows we are only just at the beginning of the military revolution that is drone warfare. Generals the world over will have been watching this attack and asking themselves two key questions. Could we do something like that? And are we prepared if someone tries to do something like that to us? To get answers to those questions and more, we went to an expert. First, I wanted to know Sam's reaction to the whole operation.
We first witnessed eyewitness videos of people filming in shock, essentially drones taking off from these cargo containers, and then we actually saw videos from drones themselves that bear down on the Russian bombers right before they strike them. Putting that basically together ultimately reveals that Ukraine spent a year and a half planning an operation where they would essentially disguise a drone launch point as a typical cargo truck that roam Russia probably in the millions on any given day. Those were pre-positioned in a way to give these tactical UAVs the shortest possible flight time, and therefore to basically negate any specific air defense capabilities from those who are defending those Russian strategic bases. Half of those drones and crates functioned as intended, others did not. We've seen videos of one crate, essentially cargo container rather, burst into flames. We saw Russians climbing on top of, trying to prevent the drones from getting launched. But those that did work, those drones that actually took off from the cargo containers as intended, damaged around 24 Russian strategic bombers. Ultimately, this was a very successful attack, a highly successful strike on Russian assets, which today are relatively irreplaceable. Each of those aircraft cost at least $100 million. Russians were actually equipping their bases and airports with some form of air defense capabilities. The soldiers and those responsible for defending those bases against aerial and drone strikes were probably looking for long-range UAVs that Ukraine has launched. They were probably not ready to deal with the threat of these short-range tactical UAVs that literally snuck in below the radar.
What do we know about the technology used in this unprecedented attack?
There was a mix of capabilities that enabled these drones to fly on a pre-programmed route to a specific base, and once those drones were near their intended targets, the pilots took over and piloted those aircraft at the bombers' vulnerable spots. It appears that some of these drones used Russian mobile communications for operations. There were a lot of questions raised about AI and whether AI was used, but again, there was probably a small component of this attack involved some of the AI capabilities we are used to right now on the battlefield. They didn't have to have a very large, heavy munition strapped to the drone, but they did have munitions that would ignite and explode. Obviously, these were UAVs that were supposed to explode on target, and that's exactly what happened. Again, it was all about hitting a specific spot in an aircraft to make sure that the damage would be most extensive, even without a very significant explosion.
Is this a tactic we can expect to see more of in warfare?
I think we witnessed something similar in Hollywood first. I believe it's London has fallen or Olympus has fallen. We saw a truck with essentially a crate with lots of UAVs that was positioned nearby where US President and his entourage were fishing. And once those drones were launched, there was very little warning and very little that the Secret Service could actually do. And I think that goes back about maybe 7 or 8 years or thereabouts. The capabilities were there and technologies were there. And obviously people's imagination, whether they're in Hollywood or if they're engineers or weapons developers, were all working in the same direction. This type of attack requires planning. It requires intelligence. It requires reconnaissance. It requires adequate training of those who would be involved in this particular attack. So even if, for example, you can still acquire, let's say, DJI Mavic drone or even a dozen FPV type drones and you can assemble them yourselves, it's not that easy to actually execute an attack of this scale and especially of this success. So it is entirely possible that there could be copycat strikes against, let's say, US or allied assets or even other locations, airports around the world. But the point is, it requires a lot of technical expertise and it requires a lot of planning. And certainly a lot of daring and luck, as we have seen in the case of Israel and as we have seen in the case of Ukraine.
Could we see terror groups or non-state actors using these capabilities?
Right now, we witness states execute something like that, but there are non-state actors that are quite wealthy, quite capable. Certainly, for example, some of the drug cartels and criminal organizations with budgets in the billions that can purchase technical capability can potentially come up with a similar plan or execute something similar. But we haven't seen that yet. We've only seen states do that. Again, it requires not just the technology, but the planning and reconnaissance. And an actor willing to do something like that has to basically go up against the potential target's defenses that include counterintelligence and intelligence capabilities that now will be hunting for and looking for these type of threats.
How have militaries around the world reacted to this attack?
Probably one thought that was common across the militaries that operate long-range drones, long-range aircraft, cargo lift aircraft or something similar is that these type of airplanes now need additional protections against tactical drones that could be launched from just a few kilometers away and essentially arrive on target mostly undetected. How to deal with that threat is probably on the mind of many militaries and many high-level government officials around the world.
Would the US be prepared to defend itself against a similar kind of attack?
There's a lot of training that's already taken place in trying to manage the threat of tactical UAVs and long-range UAVs. Certainly there's a lot of actors involved because defending the US airspace is not just the responsibility of the military. There are also civilian agencies like the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Homeland Security. So this would involve a combination of efforts and a combination of factors, but certainly understanding the threat and the scope and the capabilities of that threat is the first step. Ukraine and Israel have carried out these attacks already, but again, these were attacks that were in the planning stages for a very long time. So whoever is willing to attack has to have these plans and technologies in place.
Lastly, I wanted to know what this technology means for the future of warfare.
Obviously, drones are highly effective and they are impacting warfare in ways we haven't seen before. And yet, in order to hold a territory, to hold the ground, in order to hold a village or a city, you need infantry. You need regular soldiers. And that isn't changing, and that's unlikely to change in the near future. So the impact of attacks like Spiderweb are going to be basically pinpointed attacks on very specific targets. This is not designed for mass scale application. This is designed to target very specific things very specific assets at very specific times.
That's where this tape stops, but we'll be back soon to play you through another episode of War on Tape. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you want more videos like this in your feed, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.